It is so good to be with all of you again on this Sunday. Happy New Year. Look at our world. Look at us. Wow. Only 5 days into a new year, and it has already been quite a week. 12 million acres destroyed in the bushfire of Australia. Trump ordering the murder of Iran's Major General Soleimani, and yesterday's international protests against what some are fearing might become a global war. And all of this on the heels of attacks during Hanukkah. Stanley Hauerwas once reminded us that Jesus was born into a world where children are killed and continue to be killed to protect the power of the tyrants like Herod. And my goodness, the first 5 days of 2020 have looked a lot like the dawning days of the Common Era. And maybe it's because it's a new year, and I want to be hopeful about the decade ahead, or maybe it's because I'm exhausted and I'm overwhelmed by all of the negative news stories, but somehow my focus just wouldn't stay trained on the horror of Herod. I kept looking away, and not out of denial, but because I am tired of bad guys like Herod and Trump pulling all the focus. After the brutal attack last Saturday on a group of worshipers in New York, a friend of mine, a rabbi, sent out the advice that Fred Rogers gave his pint-sized neighbors. Fred Rogers said, "When I was a boy and I would see scary things in the news, my mother would say to me, 'Look for the helpers. You will always find the people who are helping.'" Nadia Bolz-Weber likes to call chapter 2 of Matthew's Gospel the story of Joseph the Protector. A powerful king and a peasant in an uncommon marriage on the run, but only one man is described as being afraid: Herod. Joseph has moved beyond fear and is helping. Nadia has a theory about the perfect love of God who uses angels in our midst. And these angels who are in our midst come into our lives to cast out fear, sort of in that Obi-Wan Kenobi, "these aren't the droids you're looking for" kind of a way. "Be not afraid," says the angel, and suddenly, poof, the fear is lifted from the listeners. But you see, I've noticed that not all of us have honed the gift of seeing angels in our midst. What about the rest of us who know that our fears keep us small-minded and insulated, but cannot manage to free ourselves from the shackles of our anxieties? This is the question. This is the question that was brought forth to Father Greg Boyle recently. Father Boyle has worked for 30 years now in one of the poorest neighborhoods in Los Angeles, where he founded the world's largest gang intervention and rehabilitation program. And despite having buried 183 murdered friends, and been the presider at over 200 gang-related funerals, Father Boyle is anything but afraid. And he was giving this talk when a woman in the audience pointed out she didn't live near any gangs. She had a privileged life among Unitarian Universalist congregants in Connecticut. And she asked, "What can I do What can I do besides shrugging my shoulders and writing a check? Well, don't stop writing the checks, said Father Boyle, and everyone laughed. But then he said, the answer really is kinship. Everybody is so exhausted by the tenor of polarity that is out there right now. And the division is the opposite of God. And he told the story of the rich man and Lazarus, and he says that the rich man is in hell not because he's rich, but because he refused to be in relationship with Lazarus. That parable is not about bank accounts and heaven, it is really about us. And Jesus' desire that all may be one. Jesus is counseling us to draw our circle of compassion so wide that nobody stands outside. But it is so hard to do. Earlier this year, I visited a kid. I visited this kid in the basement holding cell of the juvenile courts on Jarvis Street. He was involved with a Toronto gang and had stabbed someone, not for the first time. And the previous year, I had attended his mother's funeral. And many of you had helped me provide food for him and his siblings when we learned that his mother had been a heroin addict his whole life. Father Boyle says, when you move in close enough, you begin to stand in awe of what people have to carry instead of standing in judgment of how they carry it. And after 30 years of working with gang members, Father Boyle says it's not conflict that creates gang violence. It's not conflict, but an absolute lethal absence of hope. A lethal absence of hope. Kids who don't see any future for themselves, kids who aren't looking for anything at all when they join a gang, but are in fact running from something, usually violence at home. And Father Boyle works with kids who have ceased to care. And he's always looking for ways to infuse that foreign concept of hope into his friends' lives. And it makes me think of Mary and Joseph and Jesus fleeing the violence in Bethlehem on foot into a wilderness that took Moses 40 years to get out of. Without angels, there might well have been a lethal absence of hope. But hope came. First in the form of an angel in Joseph's dream, but even that might not have been enough. I said that my focus had been drawn away from the Herods of this world, and what I was drawn to the most was the unwritten parts of Jesus' childhood. What about all those helpers? I wish we had the names of the Egyptian families that initially sheltered Mary and Joseph, gave them food when they had no money to pay for it, became their community in the early years of exile. Who was the first person to step up and give Joseph a job? What remedies did the Egyptian mothers teach Mary to use when Jesus got his first cold? That all may be one isn't just his catchphrase. It was Jesus' childhood reality. A few years ago, the Oscar-winning actress Diane Keaton walked into Homegirl Cafe, one of the industries that Father Boyle has started up because his organization's motto is, "Nothing stops a bullet like a job." And the waitress that day was Glenda. Glenda, he describes as a homegirl, been there, done that, tattooed, felon parolee. And she doesn't even know who Diane Keaton is. But just as she was finishing taking the actress's order, something clicks, and she looks at Diane Keaton and she says, wait a minute. I feel like I know you, like maybe we met somewhere. And Diane Keaton very humbly says, oh, gosh, I don't know. I suppose I just have one of those faces that people think they've seen before. And then Glenda goes, no, now I know. We were locked up together. And Glenda is absolutely correct. She and the award-winning actress were locked up together because that all may be one is the realization that we were, in fact, all locked up together at birth. And we are still floating together on this ball of blue, green, and bushfire red. That all may be one is the realization that Matthew's story is still our story. Some of us are mothers who weep like Rachel for the loss of innocence. Some of us are ruled by fear like Herod. Others are fierce protectors like Joseph. And most of us are the hundreds of unnamed helpers without whom Jesus would never survive his exile. And all of us are seekers, refugees fleeing the past and hoping to find sanctuary as we step into the future terrain. And whether your name makes it into the pages of a history book or not is not the measure of your life's true value. Your life is weighty and consequential. Your life is weighty and consequential because you are called by the God of love to the margins of your life where healing and hope are found in the arms of someone you never imagined or expected to know. That all may be one was the prayer of the ancient past, is the call of the distant future, and our present day reality. Be not afraid, my friends, because hope was born in a manger last week, and God goes with us into the year ahead. Amen.